Following is a repeat show that was previously broadcast on Unity FM. For more information, please visit www.unityfm.net.
Dear listeners, Assalamu alaikum, a very good evening and welcome to Friday Night Fusion, the new sound of Great Britain, broadcasting live and interactive on 93.5 Unity FM across Birmingham and surrounding areas, both nationally and internationally, on www.unityfm.net. First things first, the date is, of course, Friday, the 5th of October 2012, and you are joined by myself, Ahmad, Bostan, Gregory, and Humza, Sheikh, with you till the hours of 9 p.m. for Unity FM's official weekly current affairs programme. Gregory, Humza, Sheikh, assalamu alaikum, a very good evening, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us as always.
Walaikum salam.
No problem. Have a great weekend, everyone. Just wanted to get that out.
I think you're going 2 hours ahead there, Will. Read the schedule wrong.
Well.
Absolutely. Always good to be ahead of yourself than behind. That's what I always say. I was saying to somebody earlier, I'm always playing catch-up. It's about time I stopped. But there we are. Back to the show. And it is a very exciting show today, as you've been hearing all week on Unity FM. As you know, on November the 15th, we, the people of the West Midlands, will have to go out and vote for our West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner. This individual will be in charge of policing across our region. It is our chance and our opportunity today to ask the candidates those all-important questions. What will they do for us? Why should we vote for them? What has been their position on key policing issues? As you know, policing plays a very important part in society. Many of you may have previously had a lot of grievances with the police. Maybe you can ask these police and crime commissioner candidates what they will do to improve those sorts of issues. Is it acceptable, for example, that in some areas a black person is 27 times more likely to be stopped and searched than somebody who is white? An Asian person is 6 times more likely to be stopped and searched than somebody who is white. Are these acceptable statistics? And the answer to that may be no. But what are they going to do about it? This is your chance to ask those questions on 0121 772 8892. That's our studio number. So please do get your questions coming through 0121 772 8892. I'm happy to say that joining me here, I have 3 of the main candidates from the 3 main parties. Councillor Bob Jones is the Labour Party's candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner and joins me here in the studio. Bob Jones, a very good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure, Ahmad.
And I'm also joined on the line by Ayub Khan, who is the Liberal Democrat candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner. Good evening, Ayub. Thank you for joining us today on Unity FM.
Good evening. Assalamu alaikum to you and to your listeners.
Wa alaikum salam. And I'm joined by Matt Bennett, who is the Conservative Party's candidate for Police and Crime Commissioner. Good evening, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
If I could start off with yourself, first of all, Bob Jones, a lot of people may say that the Labour Party are constantly coming out and telling us that they are the alternative to the coalition that we are looking at the moment. And whilst many people may not be happy with a lot of the policing cuts, for example, that have been implemented, they may argue that the Labour Party say they're the alternative without a backbone, without a backup plan, or without an alternative itself. What would be your message to them? Why should they vote for you on November the 15th?
Well, I think you've only got to look at the record of the Labour Party. I mean, it was interesting, we had the figures come out from the Chief Constable only the other day, that since 1998 to the current point, in terms of crimes in the West Midlands, they've gone down from 360,000 to 180,000, exactly halving the number of crimes and reducing the number of victims by hundreds of thousands. Number of burglaries have gone down from 38,000 a year to 15,000 a year, and the number of murders have gone down from 58 to 38. Now, that is achieved not just by Labour investing in policing and the support for policing, but also whole new ways of working in terms of neighbourhood policing, partnership working. So I think Labour's got a proud record, and I want to stand for commissioners so we can build on that record rather than undermine it.
A lot of people may say, however, Bob Jones, you have served on the police authority now for over 27 years. Isn't there a danger that perhaps if we vote for you, aren't we voting for somebody who's already in the institution, perhaps somebody who's institutionalised?
Well, I think you're voting for a track record of proven success. The point about the way I operate is to actually encourage innovation, encourage the communities to actually participate participate. And I think what's really worked well is being able to elect both talented professional police officers working with community groups, innovate and improve policing, and that is an approach I think will continue to work. And again, it's not about me making promises, it's about me pointing to a record of proven success.
Matt Bennett, if your CV is scrutinised, it seems as though you've had none or very little experience in actually working with policing here in the local area directly. Why do you deserve the vote of our listeners?
Well, for that very reason, really. The contrast between myself and Bob is fairly stark in that respect. Bob, as you said, has been on the police authority for 27 years and is, in my view, part of the institution. The police authority is being replaced because it didn't work. It didn't challenge, it didn't scrutinise, it simply nodded through whatever the police wanted it to without actually properly examining what it should be doing. So Bob has been part of that machine. I come from the outside, I'm not afraid to challenge, and I have a political track record of challenging and standing up for communities all over Birmingham, where I've been a councillor in the past, and I want to take that experience and apply that to the West Midlands Police, where I believe I will be an effective champion for the people for all the communities across the West Midlands.
However, Matt Bennett, if we are to look at the statistics that Bob Jones has just laid out there in the answer to the first question, surely this shows that the police authority and the Labour Party, as Bob argues, have been very successful in working closely with the community and addressing the real issues that exist in terms of policing in our local area.
Well, certainly crime has fallen in the period that Bob has talked about. That is true, and it's continued to fall indeed since the Conservative Lib Dem coalition came to power in 2010. But if you are to ask ordinary people if they think the police work effectively in terms of their needs and their priorities, in my view, you often find they don't. For instance, there is seen to be far too much tolerance of antisocial behaviour, far too much tolerance of street drinking, graffiti, all those low-level problems that cause misery for communities and individuals, but the police just don't seem to respond fast enough and don't attach enough importance to it. And no matter what anyone says, it doesn't seem to get any better.
Ayub Khan, your political party, the Liberal Democrats, are famously known for apologising after going against your promises. Why should we trust a Liberal Democrat to be in charge of our police force when some would say you've demonstrated nationally and on a central level that you can't keep your promises?
Well, firstly, I think we need to take the politics out of this, and in reality, whoever takes up the post of a police commissioner represents all communities without prejudice, and I don't think a police commissioner post ought to be politicised in any shape or form. And so I hope that people will be reflecting on individuals as opposed to looking at the party banners when they come to decide. But it's interesting that Bob Jones talks about the Labour Party being in government, and it's all easy to take all the results when you achieve whatever stats you set out, but they don't take the bad with the good, do they? I mean, you didn't hear Bob say, well, actually, black people are 27 times more likely now to be stopped than their white counterparts. You didn't hear Bob say, well, during the time when he's been in police authority, that 7 times greater chance of an Asian person being stopped. So, you've got to take the good with the bad. But this is the sort of tactics that we have seen being applied by the Labour Party, and that is they seem to want to forget that some of the crisis that we find ourselves in today is a direct result of the Labour government. They led us into wars on credit cards, and we heard President Obama in his debate talk about how the Republicans did exactly what the Labour Party did. And so they hold a high degree of responsibility, and it's an absolute disgrace that when you see Labour politicians talk about how fantastic they have been, but they have left a number of generations, not one, but a number of generations which will have to repay the debt and crisis which they have put us in.
Well, let's put that point to Bob Jones, who is here eager to respond. A lot of people, Bob Jones, may say that you're looking at policing through rose-tinted glasses. You're talking about the positive things that you've done, the positive statistics, but you're ignoring the problems that currently exist within policing. Are you doing that at the moment?
I don't think we are. I mean, clearly there are still significant issues that do need to be addressed, but if you actually look back to the last period of the Conservative government, which in the 80s and 90s saw an explosion in crime, and the figures in terms of disproportionality of things like stop and search. I mean, the Conservatives have the old sus laws. Things have improved. They still need to go still further. I'm very amused by Ayoub saying, let's take the politics out of it, and then launching an absolute political attack on the Labour Party in terms of economic policy. I mean, I think most people realise it's nonsense. There's an international banking crisis, not the issue in respect of debt caused by the Labour government. George Osborne said he would match Labour spending penny for penny. The issue where I think Labour got it wrong was in respect of not regulating the banks properly. But we managed to get over the biggest crisis this century, and we were actually starting to grow again, and the coalition government came in and choked off that growth, supposedly on the basis that we would actually reduce the deficit, and what have they done? They've actually increased the deficit.
Well, of course, we are veering slightly more towards the economics in that particular discussion, but let's go back to the Police and Crime Commissioner elections themselves. If I could turn to yourself, Matt Bennett, when you look at the fact that you personally haven't been too involved with policing, are there particular issues that you have identified as ones that you would like to address if you are indeed elected into post on November the 15th?
Yes, there's a number of them. I've already mentioned antisocial behaviour. I believe that the police could respond more effectively to antisocial behaviour, and I find that people all over the West Midlands want to see that. The detection rates in the West Midlands are absolutely appalling by national standards. Crimes have very little chance of being solved when they're actually committed, and in fact the West Midlands police detection rate has declined from 26 to 22%, with 39th out of 44 in all the English police forces. So detection rates need to improve, and I have in fact raised this at City Council a number of times, and was assured the police authority were very, very interested in taking a great deal of interest in it, but they never seem to actually make any progress. Again, that's happened.
However, Matt Bennett, a lot of people may say you can't expect the police authority, or any authority in fact, to change things round overnight. Bob Jones, at his own admission, has said that there are still problems that need to be addressed.
With respect, this isn't a problem that needs to be turned around overnight. This is something that's been declining for some time. The police authority set them woefully unambitious targets, and they usually fail to meet even half of those detection rate targets. So it's been a long-term decline the police authority has simply watched over. So that's a big issue. And of course there is the issue which you alluded to, the sort of lack of trust among ethnic minority communities that they have in the police. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. Again, many of them due to appalling decisions made by the very same police authority. So change is needed. We don't need someone who's been part of the system, part of the institution, nodding everything through for 27 years, only stirring occasionally to speak up on the odd issue. What we need is someone who will actually take the view of the public and hold the police to account properly.
Bob Jones, what have you done in your time as a member of the West Midlands Police Authority to address these shocking statistics, this shocking reality that isn't just a set of statistics, it is the lives of ordinary people that are ultimately being affected when somebody is stopped and searched a disproportionate number of times on the streets just because of the colour of their skin they may feel? It's not a type of reality that we want to deal with. What have you been doing on the police authority to address that?
Well, clearly the police authority has been involved in the monitoring of that to ensure that it's not disproportionate. The problem with stop and search is it can be a very effective technique to actually stop knife crime. It can stop people transferring guns around. So it's a weapon in the armoury that needs to be there. It just needs to be used on the basis of intelligence. It used to be used fairly. So what was happened, and the Labour government introduced this, was proper monitoring.
I find that
proper monitoring of
very insulting to say that it detects and stops weaponry being shipped across. I think that is extremely offensive. Well, what is Bob trying to assert? Black and Asians transfer weapons, and that's why the reason they They are 27
I didn't say
times
anything
more likely. I
about
think
black
that's
and Asians.
extremely
It's a
frustrating.
proven fact, I'm afraid, Ayub, that if you want to have an effective, if people are carrying knives around, wherever, whether it's an all-white community in Northumbria or whatever area of the country, or transferring guns across, stop and search is an effective means of actually deterring and detecting that. Now,
But
that is
in the West Midlands-
a simple statement of fact. If you want to ask any police officer, they would tell you that. That is a professional opinion, which I think most of the community would share.
But
Now, the
isn't-
issue is it needs to be done on the basis of intelligence that people might be carrying knives. It's intelligence that people might be carrying guns, rather than any suggestion that you are trying to intimidate one section of the community. So we need to actually ensure there is proper monitoring to ensure that it is being used proportionally on the basis of intelligence. But if you go to somewhere where I live, when I get back tonight in Whitmarines,
Probably
Wolverhampton,
gonna get-
the
anybody
people
else-
walking around, well, if I'm interrupted, I'm afraid it's one technique to try and stop myself being interrupted. If you go back to where I live in Whitmarines, in inner city Wolverhampton, when I walk back through the streets tonight, the problem is there'll be me and a couple of other elderly white blokes like myself. It'll be mainly people who are young. It'll be mainly people who are Asian and African, Caribbean. Now, if a crime is committed in that particular area, if you take the people that will stop and search, it will be disproportionate compared to the West Midlands as a whole. So you have to have sophisticated analysis to talk about who's going to be in that area. Are people actually being discriminated against, or is it on the basis of proper intelligence, i.e. a crime was reported, this is a proper description given, and the people who were actually stopped and searched match that description. You need to have that detailed analysis. We used to do it in Wolverhampton for a long time.
I am going to let Ayub Khan and Matt Bennett respond to that in just a second, but a question some people may put to you, Bob Jones, is this, that no matter what the colour of somebody's skin may be, isn't it slightly wrong that you have a huge amount of people from a particular community being stopped and searched, many of whom may come out as innocent? Surely those issues need to be addressed whilst the principles of stops and searches are there.
Can I
Do you want me
say
to
this?
answer?
That it's a follow-up in relation to what you've just said and put to Bob. But can Bob please explain to me, in his 27 years of being on the police authority, if you are black, you are 27 times more likely to be stopped and searched. If you are Asian, you are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched. That's the figures, that's the statistics, whilst he's been in the police authority as of today. Can you explain to me what proportion of those stops and searches actually led to any prosecution at all? Can you give us that percentage? When he talks about, this is something that is reflective of some of the criminal behaviours that is alluded to, suggesting that the black community and Asian community are responsible for carrying weapons and guns alike. Can you give us a stat in relation to...
Ayub, I have never stated that. If you go to a deprived area of Northumbria, where there is high crime, you find stop and search there, it will be disproportionate relating to young people.
I can answer
The
it.
problem is high crime areas are areas of deprivation. Regretfully, because of a number of reasons, disproportionate number of black and Asian people live in areas of high deprivation. If you go to somewhere like Northumbria and you go to the white, you will find deprived areas with lots of white people.
But can you explain to me what percentage of the 27 times greater chance of being stopped and searched if you're black and 7 times if you're Asian, what percentage of those individuals actually lead to a prosecution or even an arrest?
Bob Jones? Bob Jones?
The issue with one of the ways of monitoring is having stopped them. Did it lead to a subsequent action, and what's that proportionate?
If we just let Bob Jones, if we just let Bob Jones finish, please, Ayub Khan, and then I will bring you back in. I'm sure Bob is arguing that he's probably going to answer the question once he's finished putting things into context. Yes, go ahead, Bob Jones.
Well, I was going to say that one of the ways of actually analysing this in greater depth was how many of the stops and search led to arrest, and that was proportionate between different groups. Now, the figures actually came out to suggest that it was. However, that's not the whole story, because many of those were on the basis of the arrests were because of issues of the relationship with the police officer. So arguably some of those arrests actually related to an oppressive behaviour. But I would point out that in this area, the only significant change we have seen in recent times is the coalition government removing the ability to have stop and account. Before, it was mandatory under the Labour government to have stop and account monitoring. Your government government has removed it. That is a significant step backwards.
Matt Bennett, your government is responsible, Bob Jones and others may argue, for some of these statistics that come out and do shock us. Whilst you argue that people like Bob Jones sit on the police authority, surely it's the government that's right at the top, and it's your party that's a dominant partner in this. Where's the explanation?
Two things. The figure that Bob Jones has desperately tried not to give you is 6%. 6% of stop and searches actually lead to an arrest. So we accept that it's disproportionate. There is a disproportionate targeting of ethnic minorities. If loads of them led to actual arrests where actual crimes were being committed, we could perhaps forgive it. But only 6%. That's the first thing. Second thing, Bob points out that the government removed the requirement to keep monitoring stop and account. That is true. But the police authority could have still required the police to carry on doing it. Not only did the police authority not require the police to keep monitoring it, Bob Jones actually voted to end that requirement. So he's being incredibly disingenuous
absolute
by
nonsense,
blaming
Matt.
it
This
on
is
the
simply
government.
untrue. Your government abolished it. They
You
said it was an
abolished the
operational
requirement.
decision for the Chief Constable. The Chief Constable decided not to do it. The police authority objected, and I led that one, and said you should not do that without having a full and proper consultation
vote,
with
Bob,
the
and you
community.
voted
But
to
the
allow that
problem would
decision.
never have occurred if your government had not abolished
I
it
would like to
in
know,
the first place.
Bob,
I
you
did
made
not
a decision.
vote
You
to
made
do
a
it.
decision. You
It
have
was
to take
put...
ownership for it. If you take
I-
a vote, you have to take ownership.
Well,
and not
can you
blame the
point to the
government.
minutes
If
where
you're
I
going
voted
to be
for it?
elected as police and crime
Please,
commissioner, you
last
have to
time
take
you accused me of being the finance
responsibility for your own
committee chair
decisions and
when
your
it was
own
a
actions,
Conservative councillor.
rather than just blaming the government all the time. It's a
Did the government
very
not
serious way
abolish
to behave
the requirement
because
to
you're
do
asking
stop and
to vote
account?
for you.
Did your government not abolish the requirement to do stop and account? Now, you may argue that I should have put up lots more resistance to it, but would you suggest that you should vote for the person who put up resistance on behalf of the community, or the person that inflicted the stupidity in the first place?
I would suggest that you should take ownership for your decision. You allowed that to end. You should take ownership for it rather than trying to blame the government. The government
I
ended
insisted-
the requirement, but you had a choice, and ultimately you allowed the Chief Constable to continue to end that
government
requirement.
insisted it
That
was an
your
operational decision.
And if you are asking people to vote for you, Bob Jones, then you should take ownership of your decisions.
The government insisted it was an operational decision. I led the campaign to say it should be reviewed and we should
But
have a
in
full
the end,
consultation.
you voted
What did any of your
phone lines-
Conservatives and Lib Dem colleagues do?
The phone lines are open on 01217728892. As you can hear, the debate is very much heating up between the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner candidates. But if you do have a question, please do get in touch with the studio and we'll be more than happy, obviously time permitting, to put that question to them. Now, I want to just want to turn to Ayub Khan. Another issue that has caused a lot of controversy in the community in recent years was these so-called spy cameras that were installed in predominantly Muslim areas. And at the time, I believe you were cabinet member for local services and community safety. And many people would presume that because of your cabinet portfolio, as was then, you would have had some sort of involvement in this, or would have been briefed on what was going on.
Yes.
What is your explanation for that, and what did you do as soon as you found out what was actually going on here?
Right. Well, firstly, we led the campaign with community groups to have them removed across the Sparkhill, Sparkbrook and Washford Heath areas. But the difficulty was we had members which sat on the police authority, members such as Bob Jones, who approved a program which they had full knowledge of. So they were aware that money had been provided from the Home Office, and they were made aware of what specifically was going to happen as a result of this extra £3 million worth of funding coming into the city. Now, officers, senior officers, came to see me at my office in relation to a little project which they described as installing a number of ANPR cameras which detect car number plates, some of which we've already got scattered on the main arterial networks. At no stage did they ever state that a whole community would be circled in, for probably obvious reasons, because if they had come into a meeting to say, this is what we're going to do, within the confinements of the city council, then they would have known what the response would have been. The response would have been simply, bugger off, you are not going to be circling a community. However, they continued with a program which was to install spy cameras around one whole community. Now, admittedly, in that community, you've got all communities, white, black, Asian, but predominantly Muslim. Now, there is amongst the candidates which are running for the West Midlands Police Crime Commissioner an individual who voted in support of that scheme, knowing what that scheme would be, i.e., that would be a scheme of Big Brother watching a whole section of a community. You could not leave a particular road within that patch without being detected. There was one person, that is Councillor Bob Jones, who has sat on that police authority for 27 years. And it is amazing that when I, and you probably got a clip on BBC, BBC's website, where I actually stood outside and commending the residents for actually involving in a massive campaign to have these removed. And we succeeded in that. But Bob talks about track record. His track record is that he supported a scheme which destroyed bridges that had been built between the communities and the public sector.
I am gonna allow Councillor Bob Jones to respond to that very quickly, because we are coming up to a break and it will continue.
I personally think that all of us, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, Labour, the City Council and the Police Authority, are all partners in this particular one, should apologise to the local community.